everyone, and welcome to my podcast, Stacy Personally Speaking, where my thoughts become known. This is Season 1, Episode 159 of the Journey 365 series. Today's episode is about gave up, out of storage, choosing battles in the long seasons. I got up sometime after 5 o'clock this morning. I can't believe it had started. It was early and made me a little off. I hadn't gone to bed until midnight after quite a turn of events last night, including the crazy downpour that threatened to keep me away from home. But God faithfully held back the rains for a while until I got home at almost 11 o'clock. And believe you me, He released those buckets of rain afterwards. So if you didn't read yesterday's blog to get the update about the McDonald's dinner, you should. But anyway, I went and used the bathroom, put on the kettle for some hot water, and retrieved the hot water bottle. Yes, that time of the month. I peeked outside for a bit, which was nice and bright. Too bright. So I released the secondary curtains to make the room a little darker. Once the water got going, I poured it into my hot water bottle, then crawled back into bed. My tummy hurt, but not too intensely. It was more of a nagging feeling, and considering the long day I'd had yesterday, my body had endured a lot. I lay on my left side in bed from around 6 o'clock until after 7. I was on my phone the whole time, pretty much, as I couldn't fall back asleep, especially not after the alarm. Google continued to remind me that I was completely out of storage, which I couldn't afford to be out of, so I decided to delete some emails. That's what I did, laying down on my side for 1 hour. Can you imagine? I took some time to also reply to a few WhatsApp messages, but deleted most of the others. This is not related to Google storage, okay? I know. I was quite surprised that the pain stopped within the hour. Still uncomfortable, but not painful. I realized that storage woes would be best solved using a computer instead. So that would have to be later on. It was time to get up out of bed. I couldn't believe it was almost 8 o'clock when I did. And instead of starting my devotions, I opened the window, removed the plastic that had gathered more water on the top of it, and pulled out the 3 remaining tomato plants. I had given up on them, and I simply accepted it. The intricate root systems of the tomato plants were impressive. I'm surprised anything else got the chance to grow. Now I knew I'd definitely be sticking to herbs, unless I was back home in Jamaica or wherever, I suppose, in more ideal conditions. I felt such a release, and the plant box seemed to also exhale a sigh of relief. While I'd laid there in bed on my phone, I had checked one of my accounts for one of the financial institutions I'd messaged recently and noticed the deposit had finally been made. Who could it be but God? I was relieved and grateful, but saddened as I thought to myself that the customer service in Jamaica is not customer friendly. Of course, not only in Jamaica, but I know the details I'm working with. I got started on my devotions at last, sometime after 8 o'clock. I went through the scriptures for today, but none compelled me to share. But after sharing with God and what was on my heart, I was reminded that the Lord upholdeth all that fall, and raiseth up all those that be bowed down. Psalm 145, verse 14 of the King James Version. I had great assurance of God's love that lifts me. After my devotions, I went on to take the medicine and ended up completely spilling one dose. I somehow opened the dispenser too harshly, which caused the powder to spill. When I placed it to my mouth to suck up the powder, there was clearly nothing there. So I had to use another dose for another day. I couldn't believe after using it 20 times already that this happened. For the first time, I actually saw the powder, but even then the powder was just so powdery that once it settled, I could no longer see it. I was on a bit of go slow this morning, but I felt energized enough, for which I'm grateful for, especially since I went to bed after midnight. With my hot water bottle on my tummy, supported by my tank top, I made my way to the kitchen. I made a really huge smoothie. Not deliberately though, but it just happened. I was quite mindful of the time and the day of the week, as I could not have a repeat of last Monday. I was cutting it quite close as I finished my smoothie at around 10 o'clock. I got myself ready, logged onto the system, logged into Microsoft Teams, and barely had enough time to grab the textbooks that were nearby. For several weeks, Google had been warning me that I was running out of space and that I soon would not be able to receive any emails. I don't think I took them seriously enough, but today was the day of reckoning. The first thing that made this real was the fact that I could not create a new Google document. I usually open a new document and take notes for my students online while sharing my screen so they can see the notes, but I wasn't able to create a new document in Google at all. Fortunately, I had another software that had document properties available, and so I was able to use that without any problems. The class had an extra long warm-up time today, which the students didn't mind, as it helps them in their listening skills. The class went well, but with a few bumpy areas that prompted me to make a note to myself that I needed to slow down and take better care when outlining the instructions for discussion time. The class ended, and I prepared the notes and sent them to my company to be forwarded to the students. For my Zoom students, I am able to give them the notes directly before we log off. Preparing the notes had taken me a few extra minutes, and so by the time I was finished, it was closer to 12:30. For the next few minutes, I bottled the recently grounded avocado seeds, which I had left to dry, and then I did a quick vacuuming of the room. I could feel the pressure in my mind building a little, as right there in my email account was the bold red "out of storage" sign. This did not sit well with my little brain at all, and because, like a fly pestering me all day long, that would not respond to being shooed away. And so that's where I ended up for quite a few hours. Before I got too into it, however, I needed to find something to eat. And I had no idea what I'd have for lunch. Sounds familiar? My mind went around and around until I finally decided to just go to the supermarket and try to get something for 500 yen or less. I spent twice that amount at the supermarket, but on things that would give me a few meals out of them. My supermarket caching system had been upgraded. The supermarket is relatively small, so there isn't any space for self-checkout aisles, unless they did a total reconfiguration. What they did do, however, was increase the cashier lines, even though there wasn't a cashier at every single one today, and installed new equipment which allowed the customer to handle their own payment after the cashier had scanned the items and told us the total. So there was no exchange of cash or cards from cashiers to customers. I have experienced these cashing machines at other places of shopping before, and they also had the option for English usage. But there was somebody readily available to assist customers who may be having a difficult time navigating the new equipment. Once I returned home, lunch was ready in a jiffy. I was deliberately sitting by my entertainment spot for lunch as I knew my mind was weighed down by the things that I wanted to get done today, but hadn't had the chance to. That included recording blog entries for the past 2 days, but that never manifested. I started watching a movie while having lunch. It seemed okay initially, but about halfway or 3/4 of the way, I noticed the message was very specific. The concept heavily promoted gender fluidity, the term I saw being used when I did some research. And after a while, I got repulsed by seeing how cunningly these things were being interwoven into our minds to make them more and more acceptable in society. I didn't finish the show. I couldn't. I had even started practicing Japanese on my phone while the movie was going on. I tuned into some Trevor Noah for some wholesome laughs, and then to a T.D. Jakes sermon as a way to cleanse my palate. I got up and made my way to my work area where I spent about 3 hours trying to free up space in my most used Google account. By the time I had run out of breath for this activity, I had barely made a dent. Well, Google had made it clear that the changes would not be immediately seen, because I'm sure that I had deleted at least 5 gigabytes worth of files. At present, I still cannot update my expenses spreadsheet, which is the most devastating of it all. So I am waiting until tomorrow to see what the space will look like. I know there are some videos and photos in particular that are duplicated and no longer needed, and so on, but that's going to take quite a bit of time to go through. It was already after 5 o'clock, and my plan for dinner had to be adjusted to something simpler. I made roasted sweet potatoes in the toaster oven and steamed fish with a lot of radish, carrots, and mushrooms. Dancehall gospel took me through cooking dinner in the kitchen for a little over an hour. I really enjoy making roasted sweet potatoes because once I have washed them and prepared them for the oven, I just leave them in there and turn the oven. I turn them halfway through the time. Dinner was delicious, but it took me quite a little while to make it. I was trying to gauge how busy this week would be and how much cooking time I could cut down on. I had 2 more meals left from this cooking time. By the time I finished eating, it was after 8, or possibly minutes to 9. I was tired, but I still felt good. I hadn't gotten the chance to email one of my companies about a pressing matter. This was the one for the high school, as we had been having quite a bit of a tiff due to class cancellations or rescheduling, which meant schedules changing and much uncertainty regarding what is expected of us. This aspect in particular did not sit very well with me because I like to know. I'm not saying I'm not adaptable to change, because I have had to be quite flexible to survive these 2 years almost as a freelancer. What I am saying, however, is that the circle and all the parts that make the circle should still be working towards making that circle. But it didn't feel like that's where we were headed, and that had me concerned and a little agitated. My schedule so far has not been disrupted as much as my other 2 colleagues who work with the same company. God be our help. I don't often know when to call it quits with my repairs, but there are some times that are simply more obvious than others. The frame of my sunglasses had gotten broken yesterday as I had prepared to go to my friend's apartment. I was thinking whether or not I should repair it or throw it away, especially since I hardly wore it because it was bigger than my face. Anyway, I decided I would try and repair it since I did have the super glue. A couple attempts later, The area of the frame that had been broken was put back together. But for whatever reason, another section on the handle close to the joint broke off. I looked at it and decided to call it quits. This was not a battle that I was going to choose to fight in this season. There were already far too many battles going on, raging in my life for me to give energy to this one. And so I threw it in the garbage, knowing quite well that it was the best decision. It even crossed my mind whether or not I could have used the materials in some other way. But I just don't have the strength to divide my focus and attention anymore. I had work tomorrow at the high school, and so I decided I should go to bed early. Blessed to see the end of another day. Thank you so much for journeying with me on today's entry. I hope that you will share this with a friend who you think might enjoy it. And please follow my blog at stacypersonallyspeaking.wordpress.com to get the entries directly into your email. Thank you so much. Goodbye.